Welcome to the S2 Cognition Podcast. S2 is the official cognitive evaluation in sports, from youth to pro, where athletes and coaches build to win.
This is the bonus episode of the interview with former LSU head strength and conditioning coach, Tommy Moffitt. We had so much to cover that we had to split it up. If you missed the first episode, we linked the episode in our description, or you can head to s2cognition.com/podcast to find that episode and previous episodes of other podcasts. We dive into his personal life, coaching with Nick Saban, his time at the U when they were actually the U, and so much more. Thank you for listening to the S2 Cognition Podcast. The Tommy Moffitt bonus episode comes at you next. So we got Tommy Moffitt here. You were born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, more specifically Springfield. Would you move back here?
Absolutely. It's God's country, and it's definitely something that Jill and I and the boys have talked about. In fact, I came close a couple of years ago buying a piece of property there in Springfield. We didn't know what we were going to do, if we were going to, use it as a bed and breakfast, or a place, maybe not a bed and breakfast, we call it Airbnb, or it be a place that we retire someday. So I don't know.
How close are the boys to Tennessee?
Well, so they like Tennessee a lot. We've spent a lot of time vacationing there. Clay was born in Knoxville. So they like Tennessee a lot. They really do. Their cousins and aunts and uncles are all there, and they're probably more fond of East Tennessee, as far as us vacationing there a lot. We've been in Norris. In fact, we're probably going to go to Norris at some point in late July before Brady starts school. Because we like Norris Lake. I love Norris Lake. In fact, I wanted to buy a place there a long time ago. We actually looked, and I found the spot, and thought that we were going to buy it, but Jill chickened out because Jill likes the beach, so I struggle with that a little bit. A day at
no
the
beach in Tennessee.
Well, there is. Norris Lake has their beach.
You're going to call that a beach? All right.
Yeah, that's a beach. But it's a lot cooler there than it is the beaches down here. So I kind of like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of rumor on the street when I joined the company was you're a big Raising Cane's guy, and that was the plan, right? You're going to come back up here and pop open the first Raising Cane's in Nashville.
Is there still not a Raising Cane's in Nashville? That's amazing.
No, not yet.
All the hot chicken joints, I think they probably feel like they would have to compete, but
I don't think there's any competition, really, as far as I'm concerned. And I like my Nashville hot chicken. I actually have a jar of hot chicken sauce in the refrigerator here that I got on a trip to Nashville one time, and I've kept it. And we drizzle it on some chicken every once in a while. It's so hot. It is hot.
Do you have a favorite local hot chicken place?
Hattie B's, I guess you got it. Hattie B's is the original, I guess. This brand I have is called Coops. Coops. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's hot. But I would say Hattie B's. Nashville's it's got some great places to eat, man. I think it's kind of underrated as a foodie destination. So.
I'll just ask all the bachelorette parties that come here.
I know, yeah. So Clay's getting married. So for the 4th, his buddies, their bachelor party is going to be in Austin, Texas. That everybody has a destination bachelor and bachelorette party. And Brooke and her friends are coming to Nashville.
Yep, that's how this works, man. So can you talk about your athletic background and initially how it helped into a transition to strength and conditioning?
Yeah.
Did you always know that you wanted to get into that?
I kind of did. So I grew up, with a house full of boys. And my older brothers, I had three older brothers that, were involved in athletics. We had a gym in the basement. We had kind of a weight room, that my dad had fabricated out of metal. Um, and playing football in high school, and I played football and I wrestled. And, growing up, I thought wrestling, I wanted to go to college and wrestle in college. That was my goal. Football, I mean, I loved football, but there was just something about wrestling that I liked more. I guess it was the one-on-one competition or something. But that didn't work out. So I got to go to Tennessee Tech to play football. And my strength coach while I was there, his name is Jack Williamson, he lives in Mount Juliet still. Jack, it was everything about him, his attitude, his effort, his passion for what he did kind of, like groomed me to be a strength coach. And back then he had his strength and conditioning journals, and it was in the second drawer on the right hand side of his desk. And when he wasn't in his office, I would sneak in there and I would take out his strength and conditioning journals and go back and read them and then sneak back in his office and open his drawer and put them in there. So I knew while I was in college that that's what I wanted to do. And I set a course to doing that. When I first went there, I was an electrical engineering major, but there was no way there was, I would had to study night and day to play football and to be an electrical engineering major. So then I changed it to criminal justice because I thought it would be cool to be, a Secret Service agent or FBI. And, and there was every day I'd go to class and I would sit through another liberal arts class. And I was like, there's just no way I can do this. So I changed my major to health and physical education. And my life changed for the better immediately. I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. You just got back from a hunting trip. Did you bring home anything nice?
No, I brought home a broken firearm. That's all I did. So I was I was hunting some feral pigs. We have a serious pig problem down here, so I'd been watching one on my cell phone camera for a couple of days, and I knew exactly where he was. So I took my gun and my night vision, and I went out there and I climbed up in the tree, and I turned everything on. I did a systems check, and everything was perfect. And so I turned the lights off, and it was 10:30 last night, and you can hear pigs when they come in. They're loud. They were about 60 yards away, but you can hear them. You can hear them crunching corn. You can hear them bashing through the woods. So I turned my IR illuminator on and I looked through my scope and everything was fine. Then it just went black. And so after about an hour trying to get it to work, I couldn't get it to work. So I climbed down and came home. So I came home empty handed. Mama's going to be mad. No tacos.
So what are your three boys up to right now?
Yeah, so Clay, he graduated from LSU with a finance degree, and he is an estate planner. Finance. He does personal wealth and finance for people. If he's got my retirement, he better take care of it. So
He's
Aaron,
still making money off of dad.
yeah, still making money. How about that? He'll call me up. Hey, Dad, the stocks are really low. Now's the time to buy.
Buy.
And I'm thinking commission, commission, commission. And when he started out, it's tough when you start out in that business and you really, you're developing your book. And one of the things that he did to supplement his finance business was sell insurance because he works for a local company and they have, multiple arms within, departments within the company. And so one of the ways that he supplemented his income was selling insurance. So I've got so much insurance right now. But that's okay. Whatever I have to do to help the boys. But Clay's doing good. Clay is getting married. He and Brooke are getting married in January, and he's doing. He's like me. He's got. I mean, he's very passionate about the finance. He loves it. He really loves what he's doing, but he likes training people. So he's got a group of professional baseball players. He's got some professional football players, and then he's got an elite group of collegiate baseball players and a couple of high school players, local, um, that he trains also in addition to doing his finance. So he gets up early in the morning, meets the guys at the gym, trains the pro guys in the morning, and then he goes to his office and does his work. And then in the afternoon, he gets off work and goes back to the gym and trains the collegiate and some of the more elite high school players in the area. So, he's still doing a little bit of training and probably always will. Um, and is heavily involved in some of the things that I've been working on because of his passion in that. Aaron finished Aaron, my second son, finished an internship at Baylor, and now he's actually, and I'm really happy and proud for what he's doing. He's coaching at Catholic High School. So he started there in June. He's a part-time, they have a great strength coach there. Matt Bruce is their strength coach, but Aaron is helping Matt in the weight room and he's coaching the defensive line. So he's kind of, and he wanted to go right into college, and I can understand that, but it worked out to where he's actually back home in Baton Rouge and coaching locally, kind of following in Dad's footsteps, and he loves it. He loves it. And so then last, Brady is going to be a senior at Catholic High this year. So it's kind of crazy because middle brother's coaching little brother. He does. But Brady is going to be a senior at Catholic High, and excited about, football season, excited about going into a senior year of high school. And so the boys are doing good. The boys are doing real good. Jill's doing great. We just got back from a big wedding in New Orleans. Her niece got married. So all is good in the Moffitt household right now.
Well, that's what I mean. You alluded to Catholic high school. I mean, that's where you got your start. Was it in track and field? How was your
Yeah,
start? Did you know much about track
yeah,
and field?
of course. Don't I look like a track guy? So, I got my start. So when I graduated from tech, the universities, most of your universities have one strength coach, and it was either somebody that they had gotten out of the kinesiology department or an old football coach that had been demoted. So there just weren't a lot of jobs available. So I applied everywhere, and I ended up getting my first job at a non-denominational Christian school in New Orleans, Louisiana. And a friend of mine that I played football with at Tech played there and was coaching there at the time. And the strength coach at Curtis left to go to Tulane, and it kind of created a position for me there. So and it was an awesome experience, and still I think one of my better jobs because I got to do so much. I was an assistant track coach. I did the sprints and the jumps. I programmed for the sprints, jumps, hurdles, uh, and I'm built like a sprinter, so that helped me a lot there. Um, I was the head wrestling coach. We had a weightlifting team. I coached offensive line, and I was in the weight room all day. So instead of our athletes going to physical education, they came to advanced PE, which was strength and conditioning. And the thing that taught me a lot about coaching, because I was having to coach so many people in so many different sports. And so it taught me a lot about our profession and about programming and writing workouts. So, and we were successful, Brandon, in track and field. We won our district and region a couple of times while I was at Curtis, and I had to learn to host a meet. I didn't know anything about that, but now I have an excuse about my distance training. Okay, and I know where this is going. Uh, but because I was the head wrestling coach in the fall during football season, I had to program for my wrestlers. And, we would practice a little bit in the morning time. And in the afternoons, I would tell them what they were supposed to do while I was going to football practice. So I didn't have much experience with cross country. So I know where this is going. So Harrison, you can ask your next question.
I think we'll get to where eventually you want to go, but you alluded to this.
Yeah,
Aaron asked about college and starting out in college.
yeah,
Is that a common theme now, or how great was it that you
yeah,
started in high school versus college? And is it common that players or coaches want to start at a Power Five school and then go
yeah.
from there?
Well, I think most of the young coaches that I have met and that we hired as interns, they all their plan, every one of them had a plan of moving on, and being in a Power Five conference and coaching in college. And it's just not that easy all the time. And we had some guys that were very blessed and very lucky. But whenever guys started looking for jobs, the first thing that I would tell them was about my experience as a high school strength and conditioning coach, because you don't get the best of the best. You're not getting five-star players. You're getting 5'7" and 5'8", 225-pound offensive guards. And you're getting guys that aren't your prototypical football player, and you have to spend a lot of time developing them. And then you're beating the halls to find guys to run track. Our we had a great athletic department, and we had a lot of good guys that ran track for us, but we needed high jumpers, we needed hurdlers, and in fact, we had a hurdler that didn't play any other sport that we got to come out to run track, and he signed a scholarship with Mississippi State. Was a state champion and ran the hurdles, I think maybe for 2 years. Signed an SEC scholarship to run hurdles um, from Mississippi State, and we found him walking the halls of our school. And so it teaches you a lot about it. And we've had a couple of guys that have gone on to coach in high school, and they love it. And then there's been other guys that got out of strength and conditioning because the only jobs that were available at that time were at a high school or were non-football coaching positions, and they didn't want to have to coach another sport. But um, I wouldn't take anything for the time that I got to spend coaching at John Curtis.
Yeah, and now we're going to go down the avenue that you were waiting for. I wanted to get that background first, but you coached
Oh
Brandon at
yeah,
Tennessee after coaching in high school.
yes,
That's where you went first college, right? That was your first college
right,
coaching gig. What was
yes,
your
yeah.
nickname for that crazy crew?
They were the Weasels. They were the Weasels. But now, it wasn't a bad nickname for them, but they were too. Because I went there to be a strength coach for football, and when I got the job, he was like, "Oh yeah, you're going to train track and field," which I was fine with because I mean, I loved my time, but I had no experience with cross country at all whatsoever. And these guys, they weren't there to run the 100 and do the 5,000, or they weren't there to run, hurdles and run the mile or the 1,600, whatever y'all call that. But, um, Yeah, so it was a blast. So that fall, my first fall there, in addition to working with football, I was introduced to our cross country team, and we had a great distance team. So we had some great runners, but man, they were a handful.
So what made them so good? I
What?
asked Brandon this on
Yeah.
our first podcast, but I want your opinion too.
What made the distance guys so good, or the track team so good?
Early '90s Tennessee track team was really
Okay.
good.
Yeah, really good. Well, we had a bunch of tough, hard-nosed guys. We had some guys on the team that were, you would say they were a-holes, but in a good way, not in a bad way. They had swagger, um, and they went to the track meet with their chest stuck out, and we're like, if we can't beat you on the track, we'll beat you up in
In the locker room after. Yeah.
yeah, behind the bleachers after the meet. But and we had a lot of depth, man. We had depth at the distance. We had two Olympians at pole vault. We had a gold and a silver medal on the exact same track team. We had All American throwers. And you know what? So we also had coaches that had that same attitude too, whether it was Doug Brown or Bill Webb, and then we had Vince Anderson, who coached. I guess Vince is now retired. We had Coach O. So we had a bunch of coaches that had the same swagger, the same attitude, the same toughness. I mean, we had some tough, tough guys on that track team. Again, the type of guys that, if you didn't watch it, we would fight, after the meet. And I'm not condoning that type of behavior, but that's the type of individuals. Every team that I've ever coached has had coaches that had that mentality, and they've had leaders on their team with that mentality. And so I think it's the depth in all the different disciplines, uh, the throws, the jumps, the vault, the distance, the sprinters. It was just a collection of a lot of talented human beings that were tough.
There's a really funny story about your one of your first meets, maybe, where you kind
Yeah.
of were getting on to Brandon and the guys about their scoring.
Well,
I'd love for you to take it from here.
yeah. All right. So first of all, the distance guys, I don't think Brandon, and correct me if I'm wrong, y'all hadn't done a lot of strength training. But I remember when I took over, one of the things that there had been some injuries that they had had in the past, and they wanted me to train the distance guys, and I was all in whether I was going to be training the track and field team or the baseball team or tennis. I was going to go all in and do everything I could to do to help. So we went back and looked at all the injuries that the distance team had had over a certain period of time. And so they said, yeah, we want you to train them. So, we start training, and we did it. There was a progression. We just didn't start going in the weight room and lifting barbells and stuff. We did a phase of nothing but body weight exercises. And then we switched to dumbbells and stuff. So it was progressive in nature, and it was sports specific. But these guys would always complain, my legs are sore, my arms are sore. And so we were getting ready for, I guess I'm sure it was a home meet, because they were making a big deal out of this meet, and we got to be rested and we're doing too much. So I remember looking in the paper Sunday morning, and I looked at the paper, and it was like Tennessee 1, Florida 7, Alabama 12, and I'm like, we got our butts kicked. These guys were complaining. I didn't know anything about cross country scoring. And it's the exact opposite of track and field. If I win an event in track, I get 10 points. But in cross country, it's not like that. The lowest score wins. So these guys come into the weight room on Monday all giddy and laughing, and I lit them up like, What are you guys? What's so funny? We got our butts kicked, and they're looking at me like, what is this crazy psycho talking about? They were like, Coach, the lowest score wins. So that was my introduction to cross country scoring, which I still don't understand.
It's fairly simple,
So,
Tommy. You get 1 point for your place, and then you add up the total number of
Yeah.
points.
All right. Well, whatever.
But we're gonna revisit that story because it was in the middle of about 25 burpees that we decided that Tommy hadn't figured out how cross country is scored.
yeah, Tommy, what's so different about coaching, now in 2020 and the
Yeah.
early 2020s versus those 90? What's the difference?
Well, I don't, the kids necessarily haven't changed that much, because great players want to be pushed, they want to be challenged, and they want to work hard. But I think a lot has changed around them, with social media. That has given a lot more exposure to a lot of things. Parents have changed, school systems have changed. And then there's so much more technology available. So coaching has gotten more finite and less, so early in my career, you made your decisions based on experience and intuition and a little bit of information that was out there. But I could turn on Instagram right now and get more information on the start and acceleration that was available in most of your journals of strength and conditioning. You'd open a journal on strength and conditioning in the early 80s, and there might be one article on speed development. And most of it there was a guy named Brett McFarland who was the national hurdle coach in Canada. There was Ben Tabashnik, a guy that defected. There's Tuta Bumpa. There was Charlie Francis, who didn't really come on the scene until after Ben Johnson had his success in the Olympics, I guess, 90, no,
88 to
88,
92.
yeah, 88 to
88.
92. So there just wasn't a lot of information then. And now you click on Instagram or Twitter, and there's just so much more that's available out there. So I guess that's the thing that I have seen that has changed the most. But now I don't think the players have changed that much, but I think that all the stuff around the players has changed.
Tommy, when I totally agree with you. We've seen a huge jump in American middle distance and distance performance, and you can blame it on track technology and shoe technology, but for the most part, it's open source training these days. I mean, in the '90s, you would never be able to see what Todd Williams and pro distance runners were doing, and it was kept secret. Now you can pull up Instagram and you can see exactly what the whole crew of pro distance runners are doing. But in that same vein, how much do you feel like are pseudo experts out there just throwing out stuff that has no scientific background? It's all anecdotal.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I think that is very true, because you can, through SEO, search engine optimization, and you can pay to be on top in Google. Um, there's a lot of things that you can do to enhance your notoriety and your exposure. And a lot of these people, if I train, and there's a lot of good people out there, don't get me wrong, but there are a lot of people that attach themselves to certain athletes to make themselves appear better or more successful or more knowledgeable than what they really are. And then, a little bit of knowledge is dangerous too, especially with a lot of the technology that is available to everyone today. Um, you can look at it and make these assertions about what you see in the data stream. Um, but one day you might be running indoors, and then the next day you're running outdoors, and your data gets skewed. Or if you're looking at a data set with a group, take for instance football, and if you have a group of skill position players, a group of what I call mid-skill players, but linebackers, and then a group of linemen, you can have three players doing something similar. And if you look at that data set as a whole versus separating that data based on body weight and experience and chronological age and training age and all of that, then you just have a bunch of data points there that are meaningless. And so, yeah, you have to be careful what data you're looking at, and who you're listening to.
So you leave Tennessee and then go to the University of Miami. What years was that? What year was that? And what led that decision to do that?
Yeah. So, first of all, my wife and I, we loved our time in Knoxville. But I wanted to be a head strength coach. And when I took the job at Tennessee, I was naive and thought that I was going to be there forever. It was going to be the last college stop that I ever made. But um, so that was one of the reasons why I left, is because I wanted to be a head strength coach. And and then, Clay was born, and, we wanted to have more kids, and, the more kids you have, the more money you spend. So I needed more money. And so we were in Miami. We were playing Nebraska in the Orange Bowl, and I was just sitting in the lobby one day, and Larry Coker walked in and introduced himself to me, and sat down beside me, and we just started talking. And he was the offensive coordinator at Miami, and he had coached at Wichita State with Coach Stuckey, Coach Fulmer, and some of the other guys on our staff. And so about midway through our conversation, he just came out and said, "Would you be interested in taking the head job at Miami? We just made a change, and we have a spot open, and um, I think I can get you an interview." So I said, "Absolutely, coach." So the next day, Jill and I and Clay actually drove over to Coral Gables. It was the day before the game, and I met Coach Davis and interviewed with Coach Davis, and he offered me the job there. And, it was Miami. And as a kid growing up, in Middle Tennessee, in the winter time, because we didn't have a professional team at the time. And I was a big football fan. And so you would see, the people in the stands at the Dolphins games, and they don't have their shirts on. We're up there freezing our tails off, scooted up against the fire trying to stay warm, and the kids in Miami their shirts are off, and you could at the old Orange Bowl there were palm trees in the end zone, and you could see the palm trees. And so, what better place to start your coaching career than the Miami Hurricanes, the great Miami Hurricanes. So it was a great opportunity, and it allowed me, to start my career as a head collegiate strength coach, and we took it.
So while at Miami, I'm going to list some serious dudes' names that you got a chance to coach and be around. Any stories or anecdotes that you have, or how they trained? I'd love to hear it. So I'm going to list some of those names if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
All right. Edgerrin James, Nate Webster, Dan Morgan, who's now the assistant GM at the Panthers, Santana Moss, Reggie Wayne, Jeremy Shockey, Philip Buchanan, Clinton Portis, and Ed Reed. Holy NFL roster, Tommy.
Yeah. So first of all, tough. They were like the Tennessee track team. Um, they had some tough dudes, and so one guy Ken Dorsey was our quarterback, who's now the offense coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, and the list goes on and on and on. And so when I first got there, uh, the first thing I wanted to do was introduce myself to the players. So I took the job the week before we started training. So I was in the weight room moving equipment around, and the players were coming in to meet me. And the thing that struck me more than anything was that these guys, how clean cut they were, how articulate they were. Um, and I found out quick that although they were the Miami Hurricanes, these guys were sharp, man. And I went so far as to ask a guy, "What was your ACT score?" I'd coached at Tennessee, and we had some good players, and but some of them,
but not the brightest bulbs in the box. Come
yeah.
on.
So I would say, "What was your ACT score coming out of high school? What was your GPA?" And at the time, and I think Miami allowed some provisions, because Miami is a private school and it's a small school. It's a really small campus. But those guys were, and Edgerrin James was one of the smartest guys on our team, and I've said this a lot. His NFL Hall of Fame speech was phenomenal. He said it without any notes. It came from the heart, but you can tell how bright and how articulate that Edgerrin James was. And there were other guys like him. Ed Reed was incredibly bright. Ed Reed, was the Big East javelin champion too. So. Um, we those guys all signed up to run track at Miami, and so we had a guy. He's not in that list, but his name was Aaron Moser, and he was a decathlete in high school, and a decathlete at but he played on the football team, and so he comes out on his first throw at the home meet and broke the school record, in the javelin. And then Ed Reed walks out there, takes the javelin and runs, shoo, and broke Aaron's record and set the record for the University of Miami javelin. And Ed had thrown the javelin while he ran track here at Tennessee. And, we had guys like Najee Davenport, that's not on your list, and Santana Moss, and all of these guys that were just competitive, hard-nosed, competitive, articulate, smart, and unbelievable guys. Unbelievable. In the list, there's Bubba Franks, who played for the Green Bay Packers, and Brett Romberg, Vernon Carey, who played probably 8 or 9 years for the Dolphins, and Damian Lewis, who's now and Mike Rump. Damian Lewis is coaching in the NFL. He was a quality control guy here for a while, but I think he's a defensive line coach now at the Seattle Seahawks. Mike Rump is a college football coach, and then our secondary coach was Chuck Pagano, who went on to win a Super Bowl as the head coach for the Colts. So we had an incredible roster. We had great coaches, tough, hard-nosed, intelligent players. And when you have that, and everyone plays together, you have the recipe for success.
So, Tommy, do you think Ed Reed could outthrow Ryan Jumonville?
Absolutely not. He's a Catholic High Bear, so no. You know what? I'll check that score. Let's check those distances.
I'll have to check on that. That'd be interesting because June could sling it.
But he's also a Catholic high grade, so I'm going to have to give him the benefit of the doubt.
That's hilarious. So, I could have named that whole roster, and you would have sat there and gone through everybody. I just named a couple dudes that everybody might recognize because it was just so loaded. Did that attract you? Did you know that at the time you signed up to be the head guy?
Well, so honestly, no, I didn't. I hadn't paid any attention, to Miami. And when I sat down in the lobby that day, the last thing I was thinking about was becoming the next head strength coach of the Miami Hurricanes, because our roster at Tennessee was loaded at the time. And if you would take that roster from Tennessee and the roster from the University of Miami at the time, you're looking at two of the arguably two is maybe the top 10 rosters, or maybe even the top five, because we had guys like Cozy Coleman and Peyton Manning, of course, Peerless Price, and at the time our running back room was loaded. So we had Leonard Little and Al Wilson, and guys, Terry Fair, who was a first round draft pick at corner. So no, I didn't know anything. The only thing that I did know is that the Miami Hurricanes were in a slump, and they had the year before I took the job, and one of the reasons why I got the job is because they had I think one of the worst seasons in over 20 years. They'd had a 52 game home win streak that had gotten broken that year. 52 consecutive home wins. It's amazing. And same scenario. Prior to Coach Fulmer becoming head football coach at Tennessee, Tennessee was coming off one of the worst seasons in a long time. So that kind of sets the stage for guys losing their jobs. So no, I knew nothing about the roster. All I knew is it was an opportunity for me to be a head strength coach, and I knew the tradition of the Miami Hurricanes, and so I took the job.
And in 2000, I think, is when you took the LSU job, right after you won the College Football Strength and Conditioning Coach of the Year, one of many, I think, to your name. What facilitated the change after 2 years in Coral Gables?
Yeah, so you know, I, although I was a head coach and I got a raise, um, I still wasn't making, and we had Aaron. So Clay was born in Knoxville, Aaron was born in Miami, and we were a long way away from, we were probably 12 hours from New Orleans, and maybe 16 hours from or more from Nashville, where my family was. So we were far from home. It was expensive to live there, and I knew that Coach Davis was going to be. Coach Davis wanted to be a NFL head football coach, and I just, at the time of where I was in my career and my love for collegiate football, I knew that at my age, I wasn't, one, ready, and two, I wasn't interested in just being a strength coach in the NFL. And so, funny story, Jill and I, so we were playing Georgia Tech in the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville. And so Jill and I and the boys, Aaron's a baby, a toddler, and Clay was probably 4.5, 5 years old at the time. The university paid us to drive to Jacksonville for the bowl game. You could either ride on the bus for free or get paid to drive your own car. So I said, "Hey, man, we need the mileage. We need the money, babe. Let's go." So we were driving, and my mother-in-law called and said, LSU just hired a new football coach, Nick Saban, and Pete Jenkins, who was the D-line coach at LSU while I was coaching at Curtis, just got hired at LSU. Wouldn't it be neat if they called Tommy? So my wife hangs up. She had a gigantic cell phone, one of the you know, big
Bag
cell
phone.
phones. She was talking on, and I was like, my wife's like, LSU's going to call you, and I'm like, no, they're not. They just hired it, and they had literally just hired a guy like 8 months before. And I said, no, LSU's got a great strength coach. They're not going to call. And so that night, we're putting the kids to sleep. And we just, we got into the hotel and the boys are in bed, and Jill and I are sitting there watching something on TV, and the phone rang. And it's my mother-in-law. and she said, Pete Jenkins just called and asked for your number. And Jill's brother played at Tennessee, so Coach Jenkins had recruited Billy and still had my mother-in-law's phone number. And so Coach Jenkins called my mother-in-law, and she gave him the number. So I'm like, hang up, hang up. So Jill hangs up with her mom. And about 2 minutes later, Coach Jenkins called and said, hey, Tommy, I got the job at LSU. Nick Saban, our new head football coach, wants to talk to you about the job at LSU. And I almost fell off the couch and passed out. And so I got on the phone with Nick, and in classic Nick form, like I was trying to take the job. And in classic Nick form, he's like, look, I just called to see if you're interested. I'm not offering you the job. I can't offer you the job without interviewing. You're going to have to come here and interview. So I told him, well, just so you know, I'll take the job if you offer it. And so, because I'd spent 6 years of coaching high school football here. I knew the landscape. I knew that we had great players in the state, and I knew that it was a Southeastern Conference job. It was going to pay more. And, people say it's never about the money. Nothing's ever about the money, but really, it's in most business decisions, or career decisions, it's all about the money. And so that played a key role in it. And so, so that's how it all started.
So you have 3 titles, is that right?
Yes, 3 titles.
3 national titles?
Yeah. So Tennessee won the year after I left. Miami won one the year after I left. So I don't get to take credit for those.
Oh, dude.
But
so
but I have 3.
What did those teams have in common?
Well, so the same thing, man. Competitive players. Guys, and it didn't matter. Like at Miami, we had a pool table, we had a card table, and like a little bumper pool table, and those guys competed all the time. There was a auxiliary basketball gym, so the locker room, the training room, the weight room, and the practice gym for the basketball teams were all, in the same area of the athletic department at Miami. And those guys were always competing. And so if you don't have a roster filled with guys that want to compete at everything, it doesn't matter. You're not going to be successful. So number one, they were highly competitive. They were mentally tough, and, they were great athletes, both, whether it was Coach Majors, Coach Fulmer, Coach Butch Davis, and Pete Garcia, who was our director of football ops there at Miami, were just incredible recruiters. And Coach Saban was the same, and arguably one of the better, if not the best, the second best talent pool in the country. I mean, we produced the likes of Brandon Alley in track and field. So
that's right, baby.
So, you have a climate here that is conducive to training year round. And so, great players, smart players. You got players that got to be smart. There's room for a few mouth breathers on the team, but you got to make sure that you've got really, really smart guys on your roster, and that's probably the things that are most common that on the surface without digging deeper into it. And great coaches too. You got to have great coaches.
And you survived 3 coaching changes. Is that correct? What were the cultures that were cultivated, I guess, by Saban, Les, Coach O? How were they different, if they were?
Yeah. Well, so there are similarities between all 3 of them, and they all 3 love football, love it. I mean, it's a part of who they are as people, and they all 3 came up through some incredible systems. Whether if you're looking at Coach Saban, the people that he played for, the coaches that he coached for, and with Coach Miles, being a Michigan man, and then Coach O. So all of those guys, well, like Butch Davis when Butch Davis played at Arkansas, Lou Holtz was on the staff. Jimmy Johnson was a player. The owner of the Dallas Cowboys was a player. JT Curtis, the high school coach that I coached for, was on that team. So the roster and the type of people that those men were coached by and their love for the game, they were all three great recruiters. And recruiting was something that all three of those guys took very seriously, and many times recruiting and recruiting coaches took precedence over football minds and football knowledge. And Coach Saban would tell you, I can teach you. He used to tell me all the time, anybody can teach somebody to bench press, but Coach Saban felt like he could coach a secondary coach to coach the position, but it takes a special person to sit in the home of a young man and convince his mom, his dad, his aunties, the importance of an education and why LSU was the place for him to go to school. And I think that is something that they all three took very seriously. And then their mentality about practice. Coach Saban's practices are highly organized, very physical. And I can remember how tough a Thursday practice was. Our Thursday practices were hell under Coach Saban. And then Coach Miles is notorious. Luckily I got to stay, and when the coaching staff that he assembled and the guys that he brought from Oklahoma State, they were telling me, hey, Coach, man, you better get them ready because those practices are going to be 3 and 4 hours long, and they weren't kidding. And then Coach O's practices were more like Coach Saban's. They were highly organized. They were a little more crisp, but they were physical, practices. And so, they were all very similar in some regard in some areas that I think you have to have if you're going to be successful at this level. And then their personalities of all three were different, their hobbies, their lifestyles, all of that was different. And the way they handled their staff and the team was all different, but the things that were common was, tough, hard-nosed men, an incredible love for the game, and great recruiters.
It's Tommy Moffitt, former LSU strength conditioning coach. You lived a lot of life, coached a lot of places. We appreciate your time today, and we'll have to get some torches when we're in Baton Rouge next.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you, and I'm honored to be on here, really.